It's time for the Stingray Show, and coming up on this edition, we are moving right along with our SEC previews. Last night was Mississippi State. Tonight is the Kentucky Wildcats. Now, the Kentucky Wildcats have had a really bad few years up there in Lexington, they are 2-12 in its last 14 SEC home games and 7-18 overall in the SEC since their 2021 Citrus Bowl win. Last year, they went 4-8, 1-7 in the SEC. How will they look in 2025? Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio joins us on this edition of the Stingray Show for our Kentucky preview show.
Hi, this is Tim Brando with a reminder. Those of you on Tide 100.9, look out. You're about to feel the buzz of Stingray.
And with that, we want to welcome you inside yet another edition of the Stingray Show, and this is the Kentucky preview show. And Heath, let me go on ahead and run off the past few seasons for Kentucky. In 2021, like I said, they went to the Citrus Bowl and they finished with a record of 10-3. The 23 season, they went 7-6. The 22 season, 7-6. And then the 2024 season, they fell off to 4-8. It has been a rocky situation up there in Lexington since the COVID year, and there are some fans that really want to move on from Mark Stoops.
Stephen, what's one big thing that has happened since that 10-win season in college football? What's one big thing that's happened in college football since that 10-win season that Kentucky had?
Transfer portal.
And the NIL.
Yep.
And is it one of those things that Kentucky was behind on that? Were they a little bit late to the party on that? Are they still trying to play catch up? Or is it one of those things where they're allocating that money to bigger money makers, basketball?
Yes.
What's going on? That's my first question. Yep. Because Stoops had that. Does anybody remember what Kentucky football was before Stoops got in there? I mean, Stoops built that program up. Paul Brooks had some excellent things going. Joker kind of let it fall off. We bounce around, but we bring in Stoops.
Yeah.
And it took him a while to get it going, but they were faithful to him, and he proved his worthiness and made that program into a great program.
And
then the last 3 years, it just kind of tinkered off. And what's happened in the last 3 years in college football?
Yeah. And he did it on, we may not have the talent, but we're going to outgrind you, and we are going to out-physical you at the line of scrimmage, and it's your job to beat us and match it.
Yeah, and another thing about Kentucky, no, it's not a blueprint for success. No play on words in that. But when they have a great quarterback, not a good quarterback, but a great quarterback, they win. And hey, that's a secret to everything in college football, especially the SEC. You got a great quarterback, you're going to win. But Kentucky has kind of backslid a little bit.
Yeah.
The quarterback they got now, it's a wild card, man. Zach Calzada, he beat Alabama.
Yes.
He did. He did it. He did it at Texas A&M. We saw it. Last place in the SEC West when we had divisions, and beat number 1 Alabama. He did it. And then he kind of bounced around college football. So it's a wild card season, man.
So let's go on ahead and do a deep dive into Kentucky with the guy who is on the beat up there for Kentucky Sports Radio. Please help us welcome back to the Stingray Show, Mr. Nick Roush. Nick, how are things with you this evening, my friend?
It's funny you almost call me Zach because my boss, Matt Jones, he loves to call Zach Calzada Nick Calzada for whatever reason. So Nick, Zach, I like to say I don't care what you call me just as long as you call me for dinner.
Yes. So, Nick, I do have to ask you, going into this season, talk about some of the Kentucky fans wanting to move on from Mark Stoops and where he stands on the hot seat up there.
Well, Heath makes a great point about the NIL, and it maybe not necessarily be just one sport is getting more than the other. It's just Kentucky had probably the least amount of nil funds in the Southeastern Conference, at least last year. And a big reason why Kentucky fans were getting fed up with Mark Stoops is not just that he was losing, it's that he was losing in a way in which Kentucky had not lost games. And all the while, he was complaining about his job. You know, I've got to do all this fundraising by myself. I feel like I'm out on an island out here. Pretty much any opportunity he could to gripe about his job, he did. And a lot of that has seemingly gone away. Of course, there's still going to be some frustrations from fans, and they need to see Mark Stoops prove it. But revenue sharing has come at the right time for the Cats. Stoops is confident that Kentucky football will be properly funded from a roster building standpoint. I don't think we're too naive to think that there's still going to be more haves and some have-nots out there. But he at least feels confident that they're going to be on more of an even playing field than they were in the past. Whereas, a year ago, they were playing with probably a $5 million roster against a bunch of $20 million rosters.
Right.
It'll be much closer. The discrepancy won't be as large. And that it's taken a lot of that other stuff off of his plate so he can get back to coaching football and get back to coaching a football team with football players that can identify with their head coach. He went out and got a bunch of older, experienced guys who were kind of like him, where you don't think of them as the shiniest, sharpest tools in the shed. They've been doubted their whole careers, and now they're getting a chance to shine. So I think you're going to see a much tougher football team this fall, one that does play that hard-nosed mentality, just like their head coach. And if they can get back to doing that, if they can get to looking like a well-coached football team, a lot of the torches and pitchforks will be put away.
Here recently, the Kentucky Wildcats have had Will Levis as the quarterback up there. Last year, they had Brock Vandergriff, the transfer from Georgia. This year, they bring in a familiar foe from the Alabama Crimson Tide, Zach Calzada, who knocked them off in 2021 down in Texas A&M. Now he is on the Kentucky roster. If you would, please give us a preview of the Kentucky quarterback room, please.
It's so funny. It feels like that game was 100
Yeah, it
years
really
ago. But no, Zach Calzada's still playing. It's going to be very amusing to see how startled some SEC fans are when they say Zach Calzada. He's still playing football, and sure enough, he is. He transferred to Auburn. His coordinator left almost as soon as he arrived. It was during the Brian Harsin mess. He had to deal with a shoulder injury. Ended up at Incarnate Word, where Cam Ward and I believe John Mateer. I think Mateer also spent some time in Incarnate Word. Nevertheless, it's a place where that players put up big numbers and then go on to do great things at the FBS ranks. And there's clearly going to be a much harder ceiling for Calzada and some of the other guys I just mentioned. But the thing that's nice about Calzada is that he has seen it all. He is an older guy who has experience in this league, seeing defenses in it. He's got great arm strength. But I think the most important part is that he operates on time, right? He's not messing around. Read one, read two. If it's not there, boom, hit your check down or boom, tuck it and run. Kentucky's, some of their biggest issues is with quarterbacks in recent years is when bad things have happened, they've snowballed. This is a guy who, if they're blitzing the cornerback out of the slot, he's going to hit that slot receiver, get 4 yards, right? Like, you don't have to make the great play every time. You just have to make the right one and stay ahead of the chains, because this is going to be a run-first operation. They brought in a couple of big backs, and Seth McGowan, who started his career at Oklahoma before he got into some trouble, spent last year at New Mexico State. They're really high on him. They think he brings some star power to the room. And then Dante Dowdell, he was the best short yardage back in all of college football last year at Nebraska, led the Big Ten in touchdowns. they've got a nice 1-2 punch there at running back. They've invested a lot in the offensive line. I'm a little worried about the depth of talent at wide receiver for Calzada, just the weapons he has to work with. But he's a high floor quarterback who I don't think is going to make a ton of mistakes. And the good news is he has a backup that they believe they can lean on in Cutter Boley, who they want to be the future of this program. You saw him shine in the second half of that Texas game against one of the best secondaries in all of college football last year. They said, you know what, Boley, let's see what you can do against Louisville. And he looked like a true freshman, and he really struggled. The good news is that kid, he has really taken a step forward. We got to watch about 4 hours of practice during the opening week, and he just looks so much more comfortable out there. He's gained 20 pounds. So there's a lot more consistency there. He's patient, waiting for his guys to get open and hit the opening targets. He looks like the future there. I don't think there's going to be any quarterback controversy, but, Calzada's going to take some hits. They got to call on Boley in a pinch. He can do it. And then, you know what, guys, like we mentioned in that opening segment, if things all go to hell in a handbasket, you can throw him in there in the month of November and see what you got. See if Boley really is the future and get him some vital experience.
Looking at this situation, the quarterback room, that is, Brock Vandergriff last year, what happened there? I mean, everyone had high expectations. He's coming from Georgia. I was like, oh, wow, this is going to be a step up. There's going to be some big-time production. They might actually have improvement at the quarterback position from Will Levis as far as production. What happened last year with Brock Vandergriff and this Kentucky offense?
Part of it is the offensive line wasn't as good as they needed it to be. And some of that is just investing in the wrong guys and players getting hurt. But South Carolina came out and blitzed them to bejesus. Bush Hamdan admitted at his opening press conference to kick off this season that they made some mistakes, factoring into the equation the quarterback run too much. That first game, Brock he scrambles for a first down, takes a lick against. I think he was kind of dealing with that nagging shoulder injury all year, and then the South Carolina game happens. He's seeing ghosts because Dylan Stewart and is it Kendrick was the other guy? Either way, that other big edge, they were just in his grill the entire game. He finally starts to turn things on, and then James Pierce rocks his world down at Tennessee, and he ends up just, you know what, this isn't for me. So basically they hung him out to dry too much, and he got just obliterated. The lessons were learned, I think, from the Kentucky offensive coordinator to remedy that solution. But again, to go back to it, you just hope that moving forward that they have the wide receiver talent to be able to help out Calzada. Because Dane Key, he's going to be a star player for the Nebraska Cornhuskers this year. And Berrien Brown, I have my doubts about Berrien Brown's capability as a receiver. At least a receiver one that they were trying to make him to be. But as our wide receiver 3 at LSU with Garrett Nussmeier playing quarterback, he's gonna make some big plays down there in Baton Rouge. Meanwhile, you're relying on a bunch of guys who have either been unproven or they're wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 elsewhere. I mean, the pass game is going to run through Kendrick Law, was a quote said this week. Well, what did he do in Tuscaloosa? He was an okay player, but it never really happened for him. So you're hoping that the light bulb turns on with more opportunities there. Wide receiver room is one of the biggest question marks going into the season.
So, Nick, let's go to the other side of the football. Stoops is known for very aggressive, hard-nosed, physical defense. What can we expect from the defensive side for the Kentucky Wildcats?
They had a first-round draft pick from a defensive back for the first time in school history. And you say, man, they lost Maxwell Harrison. That's secondary. That's going to be a huge drop-off. But if you recall that Ole Miss game, I think Trey Harris only had one reception of 20 yards or more. They kept him pretty bottled up. And you know who didn't play in that game? It was Maxwell Harrison. He missed 5 SEC games last year. So they're bringing pretty much everybody back in that secondary. And a lot of those guys were either starters or they were rotational players who played and started in 6-7 games and played a ton of snaps. When Stoops, that first great defense he had in 2018, it was headlined by a couple of 6'2", 6-foot corners who ate up space in Derek Beatty and Chris Westry. They got some big space eaters out there right now, and JQ Hardaway, who's a Phoenix City Central guy, about 6'4", really long arms, and then DJ Waller, who is a Youngstown guy who played as a true freshman for that Michigan national championship team. So they got a lot of length, they got a lot of physicality in the secondary. That's going to be the strength of the defense. But I like what they've done up front in the trenches. Even though they lost Deion Walker, who is just a behemoth of a man, they brought in a guy, David Gusta from Washington State, who they're really high on because he's not as tall as Deion Walker, but he is a physical guy who one of the offensive guards was saying, usually you got a guy who's either quick, who will beat you with quickness, or who will try to beat you with physicality. You rarely get both, and Goose is bringing that. They also brought in a transfer who was an All-American at the FCS level, and Mike Queese Humphrey Grace, who had 9 sacks last year, 17 and a half tackles for loss at South Dakota. It's a guy who's bringing some twitchiness. The pass rush hasn't been as good in recent years. They got to get that fixed up. But all in all, I don't know if you're going to have the this isn't a defense that's loaded up with a bunch of future top 3-round draft picks, but they've got a lot more depth than what they had a year ago. And that's really what happened is when they had a few injuries, they just fell off the cliff. De'Aaron Jackson, the middle linebacker, when he got hurt, they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. So if they can get the run defense right, this should be a pretty good defense. I don't think we're going to say they're the best in the league, but they're not going to be LSU under Bo Pelini either.
A big, big get for this Kentucky coaching staff in the offseason was former quarterback from Kentucky, Mike Hartline. What experience will he bring to this coaching staff on the offensive side for Kentucky?
It's nice. They quality control staffers aren't headline makers, but he was a guy who was a play caller at Charlotte a year ago. So having that, especially being back at his alma mater, I think is vital. They also brought in on the defensive side of the ball. I think his name's it's either Brad or Jack Lambert. Jack Lambert's Steelers. So I think it's Brad Lambert, who, he coached at Wake Forest for 25 years. He was a part of multiple great runs. He was on that last coaching staff with Clausen that really got him rocking and rolling. And he even worked for him back when they went to the Orange Bowl back in 2005. So they've got some veterans in there with a lot of expertise. And the new rule that allows them to actually coach them up should help because, Kentucky didn't look like a well-coached football team when Auburn was running all over them, when Louisville was running all over them. They got to get back to looking like that, and it seems like they've done that by changing, not completely reinventing the wheel, but by shuffling the deck with some coaching additions this offseason.
Looking at the schedule, the one thing that really stands out to me, Nick, is that Kentucky has 2 off weeks before anybody else. And then you got that long stretch of the season of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row without a break. Yeah. And the big thing is, it doesn't matter what SEC team you are, you always have that deadly 3-game stretch or back-to-back weeks of teams. And when you come off that second week, you've got Texas, you've got Tennessee, and then on the road at Auburn, then you got Florida. Then you finally get a break with Tennessee Tech. Then you're at Vandy, and then you're at Louisville. So with that, you got Texas, Tennessee, which is always a physical team, and at Auburn. We don't know what Auburn's going to be this year.
Especially,
I don't know what any of these teams are going to be. But
that late in the season.
Tough.
No, there's no doubt about it. And that's really going to test their depth that they've been so high on throughout this offseason. But and a lot of that, for me, at least you start off with those games at home against Texas and Tennessee. You don't know what Auburn's going to be at that point of the year. Is it the Jackson Arnold 5-star quarterback, or is it the Jackson Arnold that got benched a year ago at Oklahoma? But it will, though. I think the one silver lining, it's the first time Florida is going to be playing in Lexington in November since the 70s. They did a little deal with the devil where Florida was somehow able to avoid that. So we hope there's going to be snow in the forecast when DJ Lagway comes to town. We'll see about that. But
put Steven in charge of that. He's the meteorologist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go do a little snow dance for it. But yeah, no, it's unforgiving. It's unforgiving. But Vanderbilt, I'm not going to be Nick Saban and say that's the easiest place to play. But if you're going to go on the road, you'd like to go on the road to Vanderbilt where it's not going to be as packed. But I actually am kind of excited to see what they've done with the stadium since they've renovated it. So I'm kind of looking forward to that late November game. But there's no doubt that while there's probably more opportunities for wins, you can only get them if you've got a healthy roster, and that's a question that we can't answer right now. Kentucky fans are just hopeful that will be.
Let's just pretend they're healthy. They stay mostly healthy all season. Let's look at the 4 non-conference games: Toledo, Eastern Michigan, Tennessee Tech. My wife is an alum from, and at Louisville. You get those 4 games. Can and will Kentucky go 4-0 in those 4? And if so, what 2 SEC games can they pick off to make themselves bowl eligible?
My prediction for the season, and I haven't gone game by game just yet, I think Kentucky's going to have 5 wins going into the season finale against Louisville, and then it's anything goes. Louisville actually hasn't won that game in their home stadium since 2014, Mark Stoops' second season at Kentucky. So even though the Cards have stolen a few since then, Mark Stoops gets his team ready for that game. I think Kentucky's going to beat Ole Miss. The Tennessee game is going to be close. I've seen so many of those losses over the years that predicting one is just asking myself to get my heart ripped out. But Tennessee will want to play the style of game that Kentucky can win. Heupel's not going to try to throw it around the yard and run up the scores this year.
Right,
that's going to be a game. Exactly. That's going to be a game that's going to be played in the mud, and that's what Kentucky needs to win. So I think that one's going to be close. And in South Carolina, for as good as Lenora Sellers is, it's going to take them a little time to figure it out with all the new pieces they have in play. So there's going to be a few toss-ups in there. Stealing one more to get to 6 and then beating Louisville's going to be tough. But ultimately, I think Kentucky can. Ultimately, I believe Kentucky is going to have 5 wins under their belt before they go into that rivalry game. It's a season finale against Louisville.
So, Nick, if you would, to please finish this up, because we talked about it when I started this segment. Mike Hartline is back on the coaching staff up there. What is your fondest memory of watching Mike Hartline play for the Kentucky Wildcats?
The real deal is, there were some great moments, but there's only one, and that's beating Spurrier for the first time. I think they were ranked 8th when they came into town, and it was 3rd and long, and they got a little cocky, and there's Mike Hartline hanging on, taking a shot, and finding Randall Cobb wide open in the end zone. That was the first time Kentucky had ever beat him. He's on the ground, on his back, celebrating by kicking and throwing his punch in the air. It was awesome. And what was even better is that Spurrier, they had a chance to tie it after that. I think that play happened with about 90 seconds left. South Carolina drive down the field. They had a chance to kick a field goal and to go in overtime. Spurrier, he went for the kill shot and it got picked off, and Kentucky won. That was, I believe, my first game as a student in the student section. I was my freshman year. It was either my first or second. It was the first big one back in September. We rushed the field. That all-time memory unlocked. Shout out to Mike Hartline and Randall Cobb for taking down Spurrier for the first time. And it really started to domino because it wasn't a couple losses to Kentucky later, and Spurrier was like, I've had enough. I got to retire. I got to get the hell out of here. So thanks, Mike Hartline. You started the beginning of the end of Steve Spurrier.
Nick, I can't remember, and I hope it's not anything negative, but Mike didn't finish his senior year. Was that because of injury or
got in a little trouble?
Was it trouble? Okay, well, we won't bring it up then.
Yeah, you getting 22 years old. Sometimes things happen at a bar. You miss the Birmingham Bowl or whatever it is. So maybe we'll be back in Birmingham this year after 6 wins to see Kentucky fight for the Vulcan Trophy.
Well, if that's the case, there's a Topgolf right across the street from the stadium.
Got my name on it.
Maybe you keep him out of the bar and send him to the driving range, and now it's a bigger party now.
Exactly.
Everyone's invited.
I appreciate it, fellas. Hopefully we see plenty of Kentucky football wins this fall.
I think we just might.
So, Nick, to wrap it up, any final words that you would like to say about the Kentucky Wildcats in 2025?
If nothing else, it'll be eventful. Football, it's almost here. I'm excited for it, and just let's get off to a good start because there's nothing better than dreaming big. The longer you can keep that dream alive, the better. So hopefully Kentucky is a pesky thorn in the side of SEC all year long, a gritty, hard-nosed football team that's going to punch you in the mouth. So I appreciate you guys having me on. If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Roush KSR. Roush is in Roush Racing. And shout out to Ruby, my daughter. She turned 1 today. So big happy birthday in the household. We're going to have some cupcakes tonight
Nick,
to celebrate.
Fun question as we walk out. The Kentucky offense, are they finishing in the top half or the bottom half in the SEC at the end of the season? Kentucky
half.
defense, are they finishing in the top half or the bottom half from the SEC at the end of the season?
Top half. They'll be like 6th.
All right.
Boom.
So, Nick, I will leave you with this. Big Blue Nation, let's go save the job for Mark Stoops. Welcome back inside the final little bit of the Stingray Show inside the Kentucky Preview Show. We just finished up with Nick Roush of Kentucky Sports Radio. And last week, I brought you guys an interview with former Kentucky quarterback Mike Hartline, who is now on staff with Kentucky under head coach Mark Stoops. And we talked in that interview about his coaching stops and then the preview of the season upcoming for the Kentucky Wildcats. So let's finish up that interview with Mike Hartline right now with him talking about the future of the Kentucky Wildcats this season and his coaching stops along the way. Now, Coach Hartline, I do want to talk about your coaching stops because you had Ohio State, you had the Cincinnati Bearcats, you had Auburn, you had Charlotte 49ers, and the Chanticleers of Coastal Carolina. Walk us through how you got each one of those jobs and a little bit of the highlights of being at each place.
Yeah, I mean, it's welcome to coaching, I guess. 10 years in, this can happen. I already mentioned that Ohio State got in. My brother kind of put the word in, got the opportunity. It was great. 2 years there, made some really good connections that last throughout, which is obviously big in this profession. Coach Luke Fickell, first guy I talked to, got the head coaching job at Cincinnati. It gives me the opportunity to come down and finally get a salary, be a quality control on offense, and still working with quarterbacks. So it was great. I mean, we started our first year 4-8, wasn't going well. And the next year we went 11-2, and it was a good setup. Desmond Ridder at the time, who was the NFL quarterback, was just starting to play. It was just his redshirt freshman year, my last year there when we started to play. And they ended up having a tremendous run. So that's kind of where that started. After the second year, I was really feeling like, 4 years in that I'm ready to be a position coach. I feel like I've been prepared enough. I've been around a lot of good coaches, listened, tried to implement my style. So I was looking for that. And before Auburn, I had the opportunity to go be a D2 coordinator in Columbus, Ohio at Ohio Dominican. And, it was great. I just wanted experience to see if I wanted to call plays one day. And it wasn't any easier. Division II, you don't have those resources, but you find your way. And I really started to understand what offensive coordinators have to go through, maybe at a small level, but what they do on a day-to-day basis to be successful. And you got to surround yourself with a good staff. I mean, that's number one. You got to have good communication and you got to find your way there. So that was a great experience. After that, just through connections, I was able to get an analyst job down at Auburn. Coach Brian Harsin was there at the time. Loved the guy, did a tremendous job. Didn't really know anybody down there, but through connections was able to get on staff there. And, there were some ups and downs of that year, some turmoil. Auburn is what I was always told, and you figure it out when you get there. But loved living there with my wife. Auburn's a fun place to live at. They're very, very dedicated to their sports and their program. So we definitely enjoyed our time there. the head coach got let go. Most of, if not all, the staff gets let go. It's kind of just how it works in those situations. Luckily, I was able to get a job not coaching quarterbacks, but coaching receivers for the first time at Charlotte. Again, a program that's trying to up and coming. That's up and coming. Joined a new conference that year, so they're moving up pretty fast. They got a pretty big market. Not a whole lot of success in the past, but we try to do things a little bit differently there. I would say, just from the head coach down, philosophy, how we wanted to do stuff, and unfortunately, I would say it's a good learning process. I'm not afraid to share. I probably wasn't ready yet to try to coach receivers a different position, but I learned a ton. And unfortunately, after that year, they decided to make a coaching change, and I wasn't too fired up about that. But
Right.
as a coach that used to coach me in the past here at Kentucky, said there's two types of coaches: ones that get fired and ones that are about to get fired. So you learn that pretty quick, and so you go through that. So move on to Coastal Carolina. The head coach there, I actually worked with my first 2 years at Ohio State, Coach Tim Beck.
Yep.
So there's where the connections come 8-9 years down the road. And
Yep.
they had a spot again for me to work with quarterbacks. And so we go down there to Myrtle Beach, not too far away. And, over the course of the past 3-4 years, the Chanticleers have done really well. So it was a good place to be at and to learn some ball there. Halfway through the year, they let go the offensive coordinator, and we ended up going to a bowl game, but they had to make some staff changes. And unfortunately, the OC, who's a great guy there now, comes in and says, "Hey, Mike, this is no ill will, but I need my guy to take your spot." So it is what it is. And so now I have the opportunity to come back to Kentucky. I've been in touch with Coach Stoops over the last couple of years, and luckily they had spots that come open, and I was able to fit in here, and it was a good timing thing. But as you can see, that coaching career ain't much different sometimes than your playing career.
Right.
Sometimes they let a coach go, you're gone. You didn't do so well, you're benched. And then it comes into, well, nothing's really nothing you did in particular in the last Coastal situation caused for them letting you go. It was just some staff changes. So you go through the ups and downs, but you keep fighting at it, and you lean on the people that you love, like your wife, your kids, your family, and you find your way through this, and you don't quit. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But it's been a road, but I couldn't be happier being back here.
Coach, I've got 2 brief questions left for you. The first one, what are you going to be doing for the Kentucky Wildcats on staff this season?
I'm going to be working with Coach Bush Hamden, our offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach.
Okay.
I'm just tied to him at the hip. Anything that he needs. If I need to work with the QBs in certain situations, I will. I'll be on the sidelines. I'm guessing, with them while he's up in the booth. So it's really just kind of his right hand man. We have positions like this all the time, but when it comes down to running meetings, doing drill work on the field, whatever I need to do, obviously to help the offense to prepare. There's obviously a ton of behind the scene things we can do, but it's just one of those situations I think is really, really good. Coach Hamden has some ties in the past that I have the same ties. So I understand what he wants to do. I understand how he wants to coach. I think he's a phenomenal quarterbacks coach. Spent some time in the NFL, has some, he does a great job of explaining difficult simply and get these guys to understand what we want to do. But he also challenges them. And I appreciate that a ton. The respect level is high. He respects my questions, my comments, how we can do things better. I do the same thing for him. I want to learn. So it's a good relationship that we have.
And finally, with you being at Kentucky, last year was a disappointing year. Please give us a preview of how you think this Kentucky football team is going to do in 2025.
Yeah, I think I'll take a page out of what Coach Stoops said recently to a bunch of people. It's not acceptable. It's not who we are. He understands that. He owns it. And, me having the short period of time between spring, evaluating kind of who we have and seeing how we're going to do to, what happened last year. I think there's some changes obviously that were made, but at the same time, I feel really, really confident about the team we have and their togetherness. I feel like it's nice. It's nice to walk in every day and knowing that these guys are really, truly working their butts off, but at the same time care about each other. And I'm not a big a predictor type of guy. Like I don't, you can hear me a little bit like I'm game to game. And it's like, that's the most important thing. I'm not going to say we're going to win this much or lose this much. It's never going to come out of my mouth.
Right.
But I feel confident that we have a great group of guys that, in my mind, and me being optimistic, is going to be better than last year. But we're in a hard league, so we'll see which way it goes. But at the same time, I have ultra confidence in what we're doing. I have ultra confidence in who we're doing it with, where we're doing it at.
Yeah.
And I think these guys understand that too. So it's inspiring to be back here and to try to help where I can. But at the same time, it all comes down to what we're doing on the field, how we're producing, and that's anywhere. So, but I feel like we have a great group of guys that can do some special things.
Coach, I know that you have got to get to a staff meeting. Before we let you go, any final words on anything that you would like to say about your career or coaching at Kentucky and along the way?
Yeah, I'd say nothing's easy, and that's okay. I think that's the way it's supposed to be. You got to lean on the people who care about you truly, not just the people who, will just want to pick you up when you're down, or when you're down, just keep you there. It's not that. This is a tough thing to do across the board, and I'm completely okay with that. I welcome hard things, and just you got to fight your way through. I mean, in the end, that's what it is. Sometimes the cards are not dealt to you the way that you envisioned it, or when you feel like you've made it, or you're trying to get complacent, or this is good and that. You can't be naive about it, and so it's a difficult journey, but at the same time, I know in the back end, you can be content with yourself, just like I was playing. If you leave no stone unturned, but if you do and you get stuck into a certain situation, learn from it, man. Like you can't. It's like playing quarterback. If you're so hard on yourself all the time and you bury yourself 6 feet deep, you're never going to be able to pull yourself out. You got to be able to have that mental fortitude, that confidence of being like, you know what, this is a bad string of things that got handed to me, but it's not going to be the end of me. And I think that's just you fight the battles of life all the time pretty hard in this profession. But,
Right.
I couldn't do it without my family and the people that support me, that are close to it and understand it. So I appreciate them so much. I can't help but say, and this is just me coming from my heart, that, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be the man I am today, that I've grown from, that I want to be, if it wasn't for my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I was saved by him. It was something that came upon my life a little bit later on, but it's made the world and the difference to me. And it keeps me in a good peace of mind to know that if I have that in my heart, that everything's going to be okay. And I think that's it's a huge part of how chaotic this profession can be, and especially now where college football is going to, and it helps me. So if it helps other people, I really urge them to do that, and urge them to at least start to understand it, or try to have a relationship, because that's what it started with me. So I know it's a little bit different, but it's something that it just spoke to me.
Coach, thank you for saying that. This has been an absolute blast. I will let you get on to your staff meeting so you're not yelled at. And please have a wonderful rest of your summer. Stay cool out there. And I will leave you with this. BBN, Big Blue Nation. Let's go.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
All right. So, guys, that is going to wrap up the Kentucky preview show, both with Nick Roush and Mike Hartline. Really do want to thank both gentlemen for joining me. When we come back on the Wednesday evening edition of the Stingray Show, it is time for us to say Boomer, as we are going to be doing a preview of the Boomer Sooners as Oklahoma's second year in the SEC. How will they do? Tune in tomorrow evening for another great Stingray Show, as we're going to be discussing the Sooners of Oklahoma at 6 p.m., and we will catch you then. Hope you guys have enjoyed the Big Blue Nation Kentucky preview show, and hopefully the Wildcats can do better this year than 4-8 last year in the SEC.